I've heard tales of your kind, Witcher.
Hello friends! Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about The Witcher, the hit Netflix series based on the books by Andrzej Sapkowski. But, as any fan of the series knows, there are some significant differences between the show and the books. So, if you're curious about how the two compare, stay tuned for my deep dive into the differences between The Witcher Netflix series and the books. Let's get started. One of the main differences between the Netflix series and the books is the order in which events are presented. In the first episode of the series, we see the story of the Battle of Blaviken, which is actually the third short story in the book The Last Wish. This short story, titled The Lesser Evil, comes after several other events in the book that haven't been shown yet in the series. For example, Geralt has already met and helped Nivellen and dealt with the Striga Princess Ada. This rearrangement of events is a common occurrence throughout the series, particularly in the first season. And it's something that I can understand. The Battle of Blaviken is a great way to introduce Geralt and his struggle to avoid moral decisions, even though he often fails at it. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves, let's start from the very beginning. As we begin this series, we're immediately introduced to Geralt as he engages in battle with the Kikimora in the swamp. While this specific fight doesn't appear in the books, it serves as a powerful introduction to Geralt's character and his role as a monster hunter. By showing us his strength and skills right from the start, we get a sense of what sets Geralt apart as a unique and formidable protagonist. It is important to understand these things from the beginning, and this altered scene does a great job of establishing Geralt as someone who is not your average man. Even though the events are out of order compared to the original story, I don't mind this change as I feel it effectively sets the stage for what's to come. Let's move on to when he actually enters Blaviken. In The Last Wish, it says, and I quote, "As usual, cats and children noticed him first. A striped tomcat sleeping on a sun-warmed stack of wood shuddered, raised his round head, pulled back his ears, hissed, and bolted off into the nettles." In the books, there is a running joke about cats hating witchers, and I might sound nitpicky, but I wish they had kept the cat hissing at Geralt as it appears in the books, as it would have been a small but meaningful nod to the fans. It wouldn't have taken much time or effort, and it would have added a bit of levity to the scene. Even the next-gen update of the Witcher 3 video game included this detail, so I was disappointed to see it left out in the show. Then, Geralt enters the tavern and asks for the Alderman because he wants to sell him the Kikimora head he has obtained from the fight. However, there he's confronted and insulted for being a witcher. In the book, Geralt does not go to a tavern, he goes to the Alderman's house straight away. There, it is clear by their conversation that they know each other, and the Alderman tells him there is no reward for the Kikimora, and actually invites him to spend the winter in his attic, even if his wife doesn't seem to like Geralt for unknown reasons. This scene in the tavern, I suppose, serves as a way of showing how despised witchers are in this world, and it ends up leading to the same place, but I wish we could have seen Geralt in a more friendly manner with the Alderman, to show that he is a loved and appreciated man in some places, not some moody loner who can't form a relationship with anyone, because that is not who Geralt is. We move on to Geralt's first encounter with Renfri, which is right there in the tavern, where she steps up to calm her men down when they harass Geralt. In the books, Geralt does not meet Renfri until he has already talked to Stregobor, and he initially knows her as Shrike. After informing the Alderman, he goes to find her at the inn she's staying in with her band, and asks to see her. After some bickering, Renfri finally comes out and easily admits that she is plotting revenge on Stregobor. However, she also tells Geralt and the Alderman that she has a parchment that protects her from any harm, sealed by King Aldern, which prevents the Alderman from doing anything to her in a preventive manner. He would therefore only be allowed to imprison her after she had done the deed. This parchment makes a lot of sense in the books because Geralt is friends with the Alderman, but I understand why they avoided the whole thing here. In the series, Renfri asks Geralt a couple questions for exposition, and then a girl comes and shows interest in the Kikimora. This girl is called Marilka, and she's the alderman's daughter, as she also mentions in the show. In the books, Marilka seems to be much younger than in the series, and she has a much smaller role, as you can see. But again, we have to remember that this rewriting of the story is a way of introducing Geralt to audiences, so a bit of exposition is needed. Furthermore, we must remember that Geralt's character in the books is very much shaped by his thoughts as well as his actions, but not so much by the things he says, as we all know he's a man of a few words. When it comes to adaptations such as this one, not having the tool of an internal monologue can make it hard to shape a character in a way in which audiences understand him. Now, I am not saying they made all the right choices in that aspect, at least in my opinion, but this one in particular, I don't mind. However, I insist that the scene with the alderman, as it was in the books, would have given him a bit more depth. This is also how audiences get to learn little things about the world of The Witcher, such as the image that people have of them, or how girls can't be witches. It's true that it feels a little too much like exposition at times, but it's not too bad. Next, Geralt is led by Marilka to Stregobor's tower, who is working under a fake name, so that he can see if the Kikimora may be of use to the sorcerer. However, it is later revealed that Marilka works for Stregobor, and he sent the Witcher over for a completely different reason. This is why he is allowed straight in right away, and he finds out that Ermion is Stregobor. In the book, Geralt is led to the tower by the alderman and another man, and in this case there are no second intentions. He goes there because the alderman truly believes maybe he can get something off of having killed the Kikimora. He is first denied access to the tower with something similar to a vintage answering machine, but when Stregobor realizes who he is, he allows him in. This is when Geralt is allowed in and he goes through the door just like in the series. Once inside, Geralt finds an illusion of an idyllic scene full of naked women walking around, a scene that I don't want to risk playing here on YouTube, but you get the gist. In the book there is only one naked woman, and Stregobor seems to use her for more than just walking around and picking apples. Who knows why the decision was made to add more naked women, and men too if you look closely, but hey, we aren't complaining. Anyway, we get a little bit more exposition on how people perceive witches and how they don't have feelings, and Stregobor reveals he wants Geralt to kill someone before we cut to Ciri's story. Just because I think that it will be easier to understand, and also because I don't really get this cut in the middle of their conversation, I will first compare the differences between Geralt and Stregobor's encounter, and then move on to comment on Ciri. So, as it happens in the book, Stregobor begins his explanation in a very cryptic way, until Geralt asks him to speak normally. The Netflix adaptation then proceeds to give a summary of Renfri's backstory, which is understandable considering time constraints. Stregobor tells Geralt that years ago there was a full eclipse, the first in 1200 years, called the Black Sun, and that according to the prediction of the wise mage Eltibald, 60 women born during this eclipse were demon goddesses sent by Lilith, and they were sent to cause chaos and destruction. Stregobor started locking the girls in towers because according to him, he wanted to protect humankind, but they all died. After they died, he performed autopsies on them, and we assumed that he was right, and the girls had really suffered mutations. He says that eliminating these women was the lesser evil. Then he very briefly mentions Falca's rebellion, and this is left unexplained. In the book, we learn a few more interesting details. Firstly, Geralt knows of the curse, but apparently people do not believe in it at all. They call it the mania of Mad Eltibald, and they refer to it as a story that some crazy sorcerer made up just because he saw an eclipse. Stregobor insists that this was not the case and explains that he did a lot of research to come to this conclusion and that the eclipse marked the return of Lilith. Geralt argues that, as always, it was a story made up by the Council of Wizards to control people in power. Stregobor replies that they did autopsies on them and the girls had strange body parts, but Geralt is not impressed because he says that he has seen many mutations in his life. Stregobor brings up the point that all the girls were evil and aggressive, and that they tried to free them from the curse but many died in the process. Stregobor explains that the initial idea was to kill all of them and that they did autopsies on them. One of them was even vivisectioned, meaning she was alive during the autopsy. Geralt is clearly upset by that, which pretty much discards the idea of witchers not having feelings. And Stregobor insists that killing them was necessary to save the country. Finally, Stregobor explains that it was hard to know which girls were born during the eclipse, and this is why they started isolating them in towers instead of killing them. Many of them escaped or were rescued by princes who dreamed of becoming heroes. And here comes an important idea that is left out in the series. Stregobor explains that all these girls were depressed while locked up, which is completely normal, but, and here comes the crucial point, shortly before they died, they showed signs of clairvoyance, meaning they saw the future. This is why, later on, Renfri predicts what will happen at Blaviken, but this is unfortunately not explained in the series. He then goes on to try and convince Geralt with more examples of noble women who escaped and became aggressive, and the Witcher answers that there are many cruel people in the world and that cannot be explained by some curse. During this whole conversation, you can tell Geralt has a very high disdain for Stregobor's lame attempt at appearing morally superior, and that he dislikes sorcerers in general. Now let's move on to Renfri's story. In the series, Stregobor says that Renfri is actually a princess born under the Black Sun, daughter of King Fredefalk of Creien, and that she started killing animals as a child and attacking the maids, so her mother asked Stregobor to get rid of her. He sent out a man to kill her, but she killed him instead and she ran away, emerging years later as the leader of a little gang who intended to kill Stregobor to get revenge. Again, the book gives us many more details that show us how much of a troubled life Renfri has had, and really makes it difficult to discern if the curse is real or not. Pay attention and don't get lost. Here come a lot of names that I hope I'm pronouncing right. Stregobor begins by saying that in the Principality of Creighton there was a prince called Fredefalk, and he was married to an educated woman called Aridea. But he was expecting a child from his first marriage. Aridea apparently inherited an artifact called Nehalenia's Mirror, which could predict the future, and she presumably asked it about the future of the country. She said the mirror predicted death for everyone in the country, caused by the daughter that was to be born from the prince's first marriage. Again, this was all Aridea's words, who was about to have a stepdaughter she did not want, and who would inherit a principality that otherwise her future biological children would inherit. So the whole curse thing being fake starts to make a little more sense, right? What seems to be true, however, is the fact that Renfri was aggressive as a child and that she attacked animals and even a maid. According to Stregobor, he carried out tests using curses that confirmed she was a mutant, and he went to Aridea with the information. The woman did not say anything to Prince Fredefalk because supposedly, as Geralt says, she did not like the stepdaughter situation. She wanted her own children to inherit the throne. Instead of locking her up, which would still make her eligible for inheritance, she sent out Renfri into the forest with a thug. The way it is explained, it would seem that Renfri seduced him and killed him while they were having sex, but later on we find out that the relationship was not going to be consensual. Renfri escaped and Aridea tracked her down in Mahakam, where she had formed a small gang with 7 gnomes, mirroring Snow White, and that she had been nicknamed Shrike because she liked to impale people alive. It is ambiguous whether or not Renfri was actually as cruel as she is described, or if she was simply defending herself from the thugs sent out by her stepmother. Either way, years later, Aridea, Fredefalk, and Renfri's stepbrother were all dead. She argued with her band, and only she remained. Coincidentally, Stregobor was there, and she tried to attack him, but he cursed her, turning her into crystal and throwing her in the mines under a pile of rock. However, some prince rescued her and undid the curse. The prince's father tried to torture Renfri to know where her treasures were, but she convinced the prince to let her go, and the next day his father and brothers were all dead, and he was the ruling king, which is why she has the parchment protecting her. So basically, she followed Stregobor around, trying to kill him, and apparently became resistant to magic. Back to the present day, she has found Stregobor in Blaviken and intends to kill him. This is when Stregobor plainly asks Geralt to kill her, which he immediately refuses. This mountain of information is masterfully written in a way in which, even though we are only hearing one side of the story, we can already tell that there is something fishy going on. Geralt is always very observant, especially when talking to sorcerers, because he knows that they like to use words to confuse people. But the cruel image that is being painted of Renfri could be a little distorted, and we can actually understand her actions as a result of being chased and attacked her whole life. Back to the series. So, after this corny line,
"With the fate of the continents at stake, is that a chance you're willing to take?" There's your rhyme.
oof, rough. Stregobor tells Geralt that killing Renfri is the lesser evil because she would end humanity, and Geralt refuses, giving his famous little speech about evil being all the same. In the book, it all goes pretty much the same way, although Geralt tells Stregobor to ask the Alderman for help. However, they left out a favorite quote of mine, which is when Stregobor refuses to ask the Alderman for help because he says he wants her dead, not imprisoned, as she will not stop until he is dead. He says, "I don't intend to spend the rest of my days here, and Shrike's not going to give up while I'm alive. Am I to sit here in this tower and wait for death?" And Geralt replies, "They did," referring to all the girls Stregobor had imprisoned, killed, and tortured because of the supposed curse. Such a powerful line, one that clearly states the character's motivation. It is one of my favorites from the first book. So, about Ciri's backstory. If you didn't know, both this and Yennefer's backstory were pretty much written for the show. I believe this is a good addition to get to know the characters better, but unfortunately, because this is a video comparing these scenes to the books, I will have to skip many of this as I have no source material to reference. I do, however, want to say a couple of things about the character of Ciri. In these scenes, we see her behave a bit like Princess Annalisa in Barbie, the Princess and the Pauper, when she sneaks into the market with a little hood over her head trying to be a normal girl. Elite reference, I know. So in this adaptation, we see that Ciri is behaving in a similar way. She puts on peasant clothes, plays games with the children of the village, is late for a reception, and all the works. However, in the second book, Sword of Destiny, we know her to be a little different. She's younger, for starters, and she's incredibly spoiled and comfortable in her role as a princess. She actually threatens Geralt several times until he sets her straight. I don't know how I feel about this change, because Ciri's character development is much deeper when she starts being a spoiled brat, but then she has to face her destiny and grow up to be the strong female character we all know and love. Here, she sort of starts that way already, even if she's not physically strong. Then we see Geralt in the middle of the woods where he has his little camp. Little reminder, as I have mentioned previously, in the book Geralt sleeps in the Alderman's house, in the attic, not in the wood. Either way, this could be considered the moment when Renfri gets to give her side of the story in the series. This conversation between her and Geralt is for some reason split in two. First, Renfri finds him at his camp during the day and tells Geralt that he wants to kill Stregobor. She says that the man that was sent to kill her raped her and stole from her before letting her go. She says she became a bandit to survive and that the man she was with saved her life. She mentions Lilith, referencing the supposed curse, and openly says she will kill anyone who tries to stop her from killing Stregobor. This is when she asked Geralt to kill Stregobor for her because it is the lesser evil. Geralt refuses and tells Renfri to just give up her plans of revenge because it would only prove that she is the monster people say she is. Then the conversation ends for some reason and it is resumed at night, when Renfri finds Geralt in the woods again talking to Roach. This little monologue he has with Roach is pretty faithful to the books, and I am glad they found a way to fit it in there because it is really significant to Geralt's character, and how disillusioned he is with humankind and heroic deeds in general. It specifically describes the moment in which he decided not to meddle in human affairs and trifles, and instead focus only on killing monsters, avoiding all moral decisions. In the books, he originally told his story to a girl named Yola at the Temple of Melitele in Elander. Yola is a priestess who lives there and who doesn't speak because of a vow, and Geralt spends more time with her telling her of his childhood and other experiences. Renfri basically tells Geralt that she has reflected on what he said and that she has decided to leave Blaviken with her men on the next day. In this adaptation, Renfri is deliberately lying to trick Geralt and get the upper hand, which we will see is not the case in the books. Then they sleep together, pretty randomly in my opinion, and Geralt has a vision of Renfri. I know for a fact that many people did not understand this part precisely because they forgot to mention that girls born under the Black Sun had visions shortly before dying. What Renfri is doing here is predicting what is going to happen. Geralt in the market covered in blood because he was forced to make a decision. His reward is a stoning and he is forced to leave. Then they add this last part about the girl in the woods, which is not in the books, but they had to relate this whole thing to Ciri somehow. In the books, Renfri sneaks into the attic and waits for him there. She tells him that she intends to kill Stregobor the next day, and that only 2 people can avoid the slaughter that will come if someone tries to stop her. She says that the first person who can avoid it is the sorcerer himself, if Stregobor leaves his tower voluntarily and she gets to kill him. She briefly mentions the Trident ultimatum, which will be explained later. Geralt tells her this is not going to happen and that she should just forgive and forget. Renfri tells him of the horrible life she has endured because of her stepmother and Stregobor, being raped and robbed and having to sell her body and killing and stealing to survive. All this while being constantly attacked and facing numerous attempts on her life. She asks Geralt if Stregobor deserves to die, but the Witcher is firm in his choice not to get involved. He asks him to kill the sorcerer and he refuses, telling her that she must forget about the whole ordeal if she really wants to prove that she is not a monster. However, Renfri is completely unable to let go of the vengeance. She just cannot leave without doing it. In a way, this character is like Javert from Les Mis, completely obsessed with this one goal. This is when she has the vision and tells Geralt that he will be forced to choose and that he will never know if he made the right choice. He will be stoned and insulted. Geralt then asks her where she is in this vision, and she says she can't choose, she must go all the way. And then she says she's cold, implying she's dying. After this vision, Renfri looks scared and tells Geralt that she will leave the next day. Then they flirt a little bit and they end up sleeping together. Now, let's digress for a moment to talk about the invasion of Cintra that is going on between these scenes that I just discussed. I can't say much, but what I can say is that in the Netflix series, Nilfgaard's invasion of Cintra is depicted as a swift and brutal conquest in which the Nilfgaardian army overwhelms and defeats the central defenses. This event is depicted as a major turning point in the series and has significant consequences for several characters, including Princess Cirilla, who becomes known as Ciri. In the books, Nilfgaard's invasion is not depicted as a swift and decisive victory, but rather as a long and grueling conflict that lasts for years. The Nilfgaardian army is described as being more technologically advanced and better equipped than the Cintran forces, but the Cintrans are able to put up a more effective resistance than in the TV series. Ultimately, Nilfgaard is able to conquer Cintra, but the invasion and occupation are depicted as a costly and bloody affair for both sides. The invasion and its aftermath are featured prominently in several books in the series, including Blood of Elves, Time of Contempt, and Baptism of Fire. These events are also mentioned in other books in the series, such as The Tower of Swallows and The Lady of the Lake. And while I'm at it, I'm gonna make a little comment about Mousak. In the series, Mousak is depicted as a kind and wise advisor to Queen Calanthe. He's a trusted member of the Queen's court and is responsible for managing the kingdom's affairs, including its relation with other countries. In the books, Mousak is portrayed as being more cynical and calculating than in the TV series, and is shown to be more concerned with his own interests than those of Cintra or its people. He's also depicted as being more willing to use his magic for personal gain, and is involved in various political scheming and intrigues within the court. However, it is true that he is the caretaker and protector of Princess Cirilla, and he is deeply concerned for Ciri's well-being and safety, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to protect her. He is also shown to be a mentor and teacher to Ciri, helping her to understand and control her own magical powers. Despite his sometimes cynical and self-serving nature, Mousak in the book is shown to have a genuine affection for Ciri and a strong desire to see her succeed. Back to Renfri. Geralt wakes up and realizes Renfri has tricked him, and he goes straight to the market, ready to fight. Renfri's men, who all have names in the book by the way, tell him that he has to choose the lesser evil, which is a message from Renfri. Geralt fights the men and kills them all, And then he finds that Renfri is threatening to kill Marilka if Geralt doesn't kill Stregobor or get him to come out. Geralt tells her that it is not too late and that she can still leave Blaviken, but she tosses the girl aside and starts fighting with him, even if Geralt warns her that if they cross swords there will be no turning back. Geralt ends up killing Renfri and she repeats the girl in the woods thing just before she dies. Then Stregobor comes and tries to take her body for an autopsy, but Geralt does not allow him to come closer. People come to the market and they all see that a witcher has killed a handful of men and a woman for no apparent reason, and they start insulting him and throwing rocks at him. He ends up having to leave Blaviken and receives the nickname the Butcher of Blaviken for trying to protect people from a danger they didn't even know existed. And they repeat the girl in the woods thing again. The end of the first episode. In the book, Geralt is at the Alderman's house when he tells him that he has been gathering information on Renfri and her band. He mentions that one of her men participated in what was known as the Ultimatum of Tridom, a situation in which they basically started killing people one by one until they got what they wanted. This is when Geralt understands that Renfri will tell Stregobor to come out, and if he doesn't, she will start killing people until he does. He gets very upset about this and tells the Alderman that they must rush to the market, but the Alderman is much too scared of the parchment that protects Renfri and tells him to calm down. Geralt suddenly decides that killing Renfri or trying to convince her to stop is the lesser evil, and he rushes to the market to find her. There he finds her men, who tell him that she is already at the tower giving Stregobor the ultimatum, and that he must choose. They attack him and he kills them all, and then Renfri comes out. Geralt tells her that he will not allow this to be another Tridom, and Renfri tells him that it wouldn't have been because Stregobor had laughed in her face. Then, just as in the series, Geralt asks her to give it up, but she just can't stop. They fight and he kills her. Stregobor walks over and asks for the body, and Geralt tells him to step back. And in the books, the sorcerer does not speak any solemn words. He just tells Geralt to come with him to Kovir because people will get angry, which is what indeed happens. People start insulting him and stoning him. Then the Alderman comes and tells Geralt that if he doesn't have any bad injuries, he wants him to leave Blaviken and never come back. I like this progression of events because it forces Geralt to go there by himself, and it shows that he is constantly trying to avoid having to choose, but never abandons people in need. This is why when he thought innocents would be killed at the market, he rushed there without a second thought and without listening to the Alderman's words. And these are the significant differences that I noticed in episode 1 of the first season of The Witcher Netflix adaptation. What did you think of the changes? Did I miss any? Let me know in the comments. Please leave a like if you liked the video and if you'd like to see other videos like this for the rest of the episodes. I must warn you, the differences become more and more prominent as the series goes on. Thanks for watching, take care!